Thank you for coming to our presentation. We are going to be talking about our research, quantum Zentanglement, combining Picbreeder and wave function collapse to create Zentangles. I'm Sarah Friday.
I'm Anna Krolikowski.
And this is what we did with Dr. Schrum at Southwestern University. Our inspiration for this research were drawings called Zentangles. They have large areas within a rectangle of free-handed patterns called tangles. This type of drawing is a meditative drawing that disregards skill. Our goal for our research was to imitate Zentangles and combine CPPNS and wave function collapse. We also wanted to look at the difference between an automatic and interactive generation system. The way that we create Zentangles is we first evolve images in Picbreeder, take those images, put them into wave function collapse, and then we take the patterns produced by wave function collapse and we use them to overlay onto a template, creating the final Zentangle. And the rest of this presentation, we will be talking about each of these systems in more detail.
So that first system that we're using, which is Picbreeder, is utilizing what are called compositional pattern producing networks, or CPPNs. So these are neural networks, and they're arbitrary topologies. They are basically given X and Y inputs on a -1 to +1 scale that correspond with every pixel in the image, as well as a D input, which represents the distance from the center. And those are put through some mathematical functions, which then eventually correspond to a hue, saturation, and brightness value for that pixel. So it does that for every pixel in the image to eventually produce an image like the one that you see over there on the right. And CPPNs are evolved using NEAT, which increases the complexity of neural network architectures over generations. So the patterns are produced by activation functions within the CPPN's arbitrary topology, and most of the activation functions that we brought in were simply taken from the original Picbreeder code and carried over into this research. So there are some that are asymmetric, some that are symmetric, some give us more repeating patterns. It kind of depends on what you have selected. And all of these activation functions are available to humans when they are interactively evolving images. But we don't recommend that they are all used at one time. It's more recommended that you use a specific set of functions that produces images that are appealing to you. And those specific sets can result in large qualitative differences in the images that are generated. So initially in our project, we only used black and white images because we wanted to more closely resemble hand-drawn Zentangles. And we also adjusted the images a bit so that instead of having kind of those gradients like you see on the left, we made the images a bit more stark. So they have very sharp black shapes in them, basically. And that makes them easier and more visually appealing when they are put into a larger pattern. Later in our research, we decided to add color back to kind of introduce a more interesting element. So we have some Zentangles that are black and white, but we also have the option to add in color.
Another portion of our research is the wave function collapse algorithm, which is basically a constraint satisfaction algorithm named after a quantum physics phenomenon. This algorithm, there are two algorithms actually within the larger algorithm, a simple tiled and an overlapping, and we just use the simple tiled because it better suits our research. The simple tiled algorithm uses a minimum entropy heuristic, and it uses these little tiles, n by n tiles. It takes a look at the larger output and looks at an n by n region of the output, a size of the tile, and it chooses the tile with the lowest amount of forbidden neighbors that can go around it, and it places that inside the output permanently. And then from there, the constraint information is updated by propagation to the rest of the wave, which is considered collapsing the wave. And the constraint information that it updates is just the next set of neighbors that can go in the next spot. In the simple tiled algorithm, we have this concept of cardinalities, which are symmetry types isomorphic to letters, and we only use 5 of the default wave function collapse symmetry types that were given to us by the original algorithm, and those are the X, I, L, T, and slash types. These types determine the amount of reflections and rotations that are applied to every tile.
So kind of to review how this all goes together, Picbreeder uses CPPNs to produce these initial tile images. Some of the tiles are selected to become patterns, which are produced using wave function collapse, and one or more are used as template images, and those patterns are then filled into that template image depending on where the image is black or non-black. And the final image definitely varies depending on the number of images that you choose. So you have to choose a minimum of 2 images, and when you do that, one of your tile images is repeated as both a template image and a tile image. So it is used as the background, but it also becomes a pattern. Once you get to 3, you're able to have 3 unique images, so the template is completely unique from the tile images. Once you get to 4, something really interesting happens. 2 template images are selected where one is a repeating, so one is a template and a tile. But the reason why we do this is because we then fill in patterns depending on where both images are black, both images are white, or non-black rather, or there is an overlap of the images. So one is black and one is non-black. And by doing this, we're able to actually put 3 images into the final result, or 3 images into patterns, which are then filled into the final result. Once we get to 5 selected images, you don't have to have any repeating images, so the 2 template images are completely separate from the 3 tile images that become patterns. However, once we get to 6 or more images, it becomes a little bit more complicated. We go back to having just 1 template image, and then the patterns are made up of 1 or more tile images. So you get patterns that are actually produced using multiple images instead of just 1. And when you have images that have similar color schemes or kind of similar patterns, you can get some really, really interesting patterns produced using that method. So the way that interactive evolution works is in Picbreeder, it uses pure elitist selection, meaning that the user will see 20 images and then select a certain number of individuals from those images that they like, that are appealing to them for some reason. And then they're then able to evolve them, meaning that those images become the parents for the next generation of images. And they can do this as many times as they want, until eventually they decide that they want to use a certain selection of images to create a Zentangle. And they do that by clicking that little Z button that we added in there. And you can see next to the Z button, there are also the controls for having images be colorful or black and white, and that's also where that start control comes in. So that's what makes these patterns start black and non-black versus having those gradients that we talked about earlier. So here are some of our human-generated black and white Zentangle results. I'll give you a couple of seconds to take a look at them. And here are some of our human-generated colored results. So you can see that extra element of color definitely adds to these images and kind of makes them extra unique. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to look at these as well. So overall, what we discovered is that human users can produce a very large variety of results depending on their preferences. And in this case, the final product is created using human-computer collaboration, which is really cool. And as you can see, the activation functions create very qualitative differences. So basically, what the human has control over is they can't decide the symmetry types, but they can choose the activation functions and how many images to include, and how many times that they're going to create a Zentangle with a given set. So those activation functions that they're choosing are definitely making a difference in what their final results are looking like. As you could see in this example, some of the activation functions create wavier images and some create kind of more angular or sharper images. So that's where a lot of the differences come in this human-produced set. However, humans are also capable of producing degenerates, and this generally happens when images are overly complex or noisy. So usually when a user selects more than 6 images, the end result can become kind of chaotic because having multiple tiles in one pattern has the potential to not work out very well. Sometimes, as I said earlier, when the colors are similar or when the patterns work really well together, you can get some really interesting results. But you can also have cases like these where it's very obvious that's what's happening is just a bunch of very different images are just kind of being chaotically thrown together.
Now I'm going to talk about automated evolution. To do automated evolution, we used the non-dominated sorting genetic algorithm 2, which is a Pareto-based multi-objective algorithm. And in that, we used 3 different selection schemes: random, half black, and 3-color. The random chooses tiles at random. The half black tries to choose tiles that have a ratio of black pixels to white pixels as close as possible to 1/2. And then the half black 3-color scheme tries to maximize the red, blue, and green pixels in competition with each other, as well as normalizing to the amount of black, just that there is an appropriate amount of black to white pixels in each image. The system makes 3 Zentangles per generation, and for every Zentangle, it randomly selects a number of images between 2 to 6. Here are what some of the automated results look like. These are from the random and half black scheme, which create black and white images. I will give you a second to look at these. Here are some with color. All 3 schemes are capable of making images with color. What we found that was interesting from automated evolution is that the best results are similar to the interactive results. Take a minute and to the right, look at these 2 images. One of these images is automated and one of these images was interactive, and I will tell you in a second. But the fact that it might take you a random guess to determine which one is a very interesting result of our system. These images are not tailored to user preferences, however, so you kind of have to curate the best images after the fact instead of choosing which functions and which images that you like along the way. And by the way, the top one is the automated image. The random scheme produces a wide range of results, but occasionally will choose bad selections. The half-black scheme seems to exert high selection pressure, which I will talk about in a minute, and the half-black 3-color scheme gives us a high diversity of results because of the competition along the trade-off surface. There is no dominant niche or solution between any of the colors. Automated generation degenerates look like this. The random scheme and the half-black scheme can both make homogeneous degenerates where the 2 pattern images are so similar that they're non-distinguishable from each other in the final image. The half-black degenerate is literally half black. The system seems to want to choose images that are actually half black. And then the random scheme can sometimes choose poor images as the templates, resulting in not enough of the second pattern being present in the final image. Looking at the difference between our Zentangles, our computer Zentangles, and these hand-drawn Zentangles, we are very happy with our results. We think that ours are very interesting in their own way and very similar and reminiscent. There are some differences between the two, as you can see in the hand-drawn Zentangles. Some of the patterns have a lot of scale variation. Some of them are also more organic, and some of them are also in different orientations.
Yeah, so as Sarah said, we are very, very happy with what we have produced. We feel that they are very reminiscent of Zentangles. You can definitely tell that that was our inspiration. And we're also really happy that our system is able to adapt to user tastes when users are using it. However, we do definitely see some interesting areas for future work, and one of those is potentially using better fitness functions in order to improve automated generation. So the goal of that would basically be to try and avoid the degenerates that we are running into, because it does require some curation to figure out which images are the good ones that look like human created ones and which ones kind of just um, don't look so nice or get very repetitive. And then we also are interested in potentially adding in things like scale variation. So we aren't sure exactly how that would look. It might be that a user can decide what scale they want different patterns to be at, or it could also just be kind of randomly. Some patterns are at different scales than others. That's pretty easy to implement. And organic patterns are another thing that we're very interested in, and wave function collapse's overlapping algorithm is something that we could use for that. So that generally creates patterns that have less exact repetition and can create more of those organic movements, shapes, etc. So that would be a really interesting thing to try and apply to this project. But overall, we're really happy with what our results have been.
Thank you for coming to our presentation. You can scan the barcode below to see more results, and the GitHub repo is also below, and our emails are down below if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.